Did you know that 75% of children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates? And if you're shaking your head going, oh my God, that's horrible for children, you are not much better. And we're going to find out why, and more importantly, what you can do about that with our guest today on the Movement Movement podcast. But first, hello, I'm Stephen Sashen from ZeroShoes.com, your host for the Movement Movement podcast. And I call it the Movement Movement because we are creating a movement movement. Here at Zero Shoes in particular, we're trying to make natural movement the obvious, better, healthy choice, the way natural food is. And this is a grassroots, groundswell thing that it's going to take to make that happen, to overcome the mythology, the lies, the propaganda that you've been hearing from Big Shoe, because the Movement Movement podcast is for people who want to know the truth about what it takes to have a happy, healthy, strong body, to enjoy running, hiking, playing, dancing, or whatever it is that you enjoy doing. Feet first, since those things are your foundation. You know the drill. If you like what you hear here, that's fun. Then go to jointhemovementmovement.com. You can find out all the different places you can interact with us. And wherever you're enjoying this podcast, like and subscribe and review and share and click the bell if you're on YouTube, and you know how to do all of those things. So let's jump in. I am really happy to be joined by our guest, Darryl Edwards. Darryl, I don't even do intros for people because anything I would say would sound ridiculous and scripted and stupid. So why don't you tell human beings who you are, what you're doing here, and why you have the great sci-fi look, because I can see the reflection of the screen in your glasses. It's like you're being controlled.
Okay, so is that yes, okay. Oh. So as nice. I'll just remove them. Okay.
Oh,
so
wow. It's like Clark Kent. Okay, wait. That's Clark Kent.
If you recognize me, this is Darryl Edwards, glasses on.
Clark Kent.
Now I become superhuman without them. So yeah, I actually prefer Clark Kent to Superman because you don't know how strong Clark Kent is, but he's just as strong as Superman.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, yes. Better to look weak and be strong than strong and be weak. Anyway, so yes, I'm Darryl Edwards. I reside in London, England, and I am the founder of Primal Play. And Primal Play is really blending primal, natural, instinctive, universal movement that's kind of informed by evolutionary biology, evolutionary fitness. What did our ancestors do, and how can it inform us today in the 21st century in a very sedentary environment? And using play theory to make what we have to do to maintain good health and vitality, make it more fun and engaging and joyful. So that's really what Primal Play is about.
So before we jump in, and I want to have you share a movement thing that the listeners / viewers can do. I know that you have the history. How you got here is one of those. It's a classic story. It's what we hear all the time. It couldn't be more normal. Tell people how this happened, because this is one of my favorite things.
So my former career, I was a computer programmer in investment banking. I was a software engineer, tech consultant. And I basically designed systems that were helping banks make lots of money.
And people in that job, typically very active, spend a lot of time not in a chair, don't spend any time just staring at a screen all day long. So it's obvious that, you became Mr. Primal Play.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That was the natural evolution of spending 16 to 18 hours a day, pretty much in a chair, eating in my chair, surrounded by computer screens, not socializing unless it was a computer screen. That was the only interface that I was very familiar with. And, of course, having annual health checks and then being told, Mr. Edwards, you're pre-diabetic. You're pretty much on the cusp of full-blown type 2 diabetes. You have elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, which means, it could be a stroke, could be a heart attack, within the next few years. You have hypertension pretty much through the roof.
You were how old at this point?
Now, I was in my early to mid 30s at that point. And that was around 2003, 2004. So, I was kind of like, really at my age, isn't this the sort of stuff that is part of getting old, and I'm, or getting older, and I don't feel that old. And it was like, well, there's, genetics, family members that have some of these ailments. So that's probably what it is. And you're just getting it sooner than we'd expect. So I was like, okay, fine. What can I do about it? No problem. Statins for your cholesterol problems and your triglyceride problems, metformin for your blood sugar regulation to get your blood glucose down, take some beta blockers for your blood pressure, get that down, pain relief for your bad back, your chronic low back pain, so all of these issues the solution was a cocktail of meds. And trust me, I would have taken them if they hadn't told me, Darryl, they will be with you for the rest of your life. This isn't a fix.
Right.
This is kind of supporting you for the rest of your life and dependency on these drugs. And secondly, if we have side effects, we'll switch out with something else. So I'm like, that sounds like an awful life to look forward to when you're in your 30s, right? So I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to deal with the side effects. What else can I do? And the only thing that I knew in relation to health and well-being about any of those conditions were that physical activity would help with my blood pressure. So I was like, let me actually just become more active, join a gym, start exercising, and seeing if there is any transformation. So I wasn't looking for a physical transformation. I actually was skinny fat at the time.
Right.
So I didn't have any outward appearance of having overweight or obesity, but I had a lot of internal, visceral fat.
Well, and that's something, and people can't see this obviously or hear this, but you are not a small guy. How tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
Yeah. So you can kind of hide that well when you're that tall.
Yes, and I certainly did. And I was probably about, at that stage, maybe 30 pounds lighter than I am now.
Lighter?
Lighter, yes. So I've gained quite a bit of muscle since then. But so I was definitely leaner, but I didn't have much lean body mass, not much lean muscle mass. It was pretty much just high levels of body fat in a very slim frame.
Right. So
becoming active, my blood pressure started to come down. Within about 2 months, blood pressure up to was normal. I shouldn't say up to it was optimal. It was normal. My blood sugars normalized, so I was no longer pre-diabetic. My lipid profile started to improve. So the markers they were looking at, my HDL was getting higher, my LDL was coming down, the ratios were improving, the inflammation that I had, kind of chronic inflammation, was reducing. So everything was looking really good. My doctor was like, keep doing this. Whatever you're doing, Darryl, keep doing this. And then I started to ponder about, well, maybe what sort of diet should I investigate? So anyway, so for me, physical activity was the gateway to living a healthier lifestyle. And I was kind of like month to month thinking, if I can delay my meds just for another 30 days or so, that's a good thing. How long can I do this for? And it's now been 15, 16 years on that journey, leaving banking in 2011 and embarking on finding out what I was most passionate about in terms of communicating that to the world at large. So movement became my passion rather than nutrition, and movement as medicine and understanding the science of movement, physical activity, and how the body responds to this sort of healthful intervention, and how it helped me with my conditions that I was suffering from at the time, and how it prevented those fast forwarding to real issues. And then finally thinking, how can I make this sustainable? Because even though I joined the gym back then, I was certainly a serial gym membership, sign up individual. Like every January 1, 2, I'm signing up, 12-month contract. I'm going to be here 3-4 times a week religiously. Pretty much second week of Jan, habits would change.
Yeah.
By the end of Jan, I was probably attending once a week. At most, Monday was always going to be the day that I would start. I'll start again next Monday. And so even though I realized there were benefits from physical activity, and I had this really good outcome from physical activity, it wasn't sustainable for me. It was difficult to motivate myself. I was seduced by my armchair far more than me getting on my training shoes and getting out, getting to the gym or getting outside. That changed as I started to think about what was our gym back for our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Right. Our gym was the world around us. It was a natural environment we were in. We didn't train, by using exercises and physical activity kind of snippets here and there to become adept to what we did for survival. It was surviving meant we had to perform certain movement patterns. And so that shift in the way that I thought about movement and how relevant it is to us as humans, and how part of that exploration of movement and just considering what my body's capable of doing within a natural environment is what started to change my approach and my enjoyment of movement.
So before we jump into more specifics about that, which I definitely want to do, let's back up and do two things. First, I want to talk about the thing that I opened with, which is what you gave me, the stat about most kids doing less physical activity than prison inmates, and my addition that most adults are pretty much the same. And before we get into even that, is there anything you can think of just to share with people? I always love to start with a movement, although we're already 14 or something minutes in, so we're not starting, but that's cool. Anything that you want to share, some movement, something that people can either do right now while they're listening or watching, or that they can do, later when they get home and they're doing whatever they're doing. Something just to give them a thing to get their body doing something else other than sitting and listening to us.
Yeah, so I would say a closed chain, open chain movement. So literally, and part of this is going to be some visualization. So I want to imagine you're compressing a ball. Okay.
So like literally holding your hands up.
So you're holding a ball.
About like basketball size or medicine ball size?
Yeah, medicine ball size. Okay. So if you can see this, literally whatever you can see right now, that's the sort of circumference of this ball.
Got it.
Let's imagine it's made of titanium. Okay, so you're gonna have to push really hard to compress this. Take a few deep breaths, 1, 2, and really push full tension everywhere. Keep breathing though. Do not hold your breath. Push, 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 push. You want to squeeze it to tennis ball size. Push, 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 push. Get the fingers closer together. Okay, right. And as soon as you've got that, take a big deep breath in and then expand. So you're kind of pulling now this time. Pull even slower, even slower. Okay, pull, 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 and really open the chest. And now you're extending this almost as far as you can. Open the chest, squeezing the shoulder blades, and relax.
That's good.
Thank you. So yeah, that's, even just using your imagination and visualization, you can create quite a lot of muscle tension.
Yeah. For people who aren't watching, I was shaking from the tension. So it's a moving isometric thing, but I love the contract and then expand part. I especially love the expand because since our eyes are in front of our face, we tend to focus on contracting things that we can see, but not on the things that open up behind us.
To the periphery. Exactly. And you're almost trying to, you're working the antagonist muscle. So you're trying to, in that sense, that contraction is part of that pulling or that extraction. So you're trying to pull that ball apart as you're expanding the chest and squeezing the shoulders.
This is a weird tangent. 3 years ago, coming up in 2 days, I had shoulder surgery. I had pretty massive reconstruction of my shoulder. In fact, after my surgery, and they also had to cut my biceps tendon and screw it into my arm in a different spot. My doctor comes in when I wake up and he says, wow, we'd had to do a lot of work in there. I said, I don't know how I feel about you being so giddy. and so then I did, all this physical therapy, and it was, how do I want to describe it? It was very... boy, I don't even know where to begin. Suffice it to say, 2 years of physical therapy, and it really didn't help a whole lot. And the thing that I got into this thing a few months ago, I have no idea why. I put a chin-up bar in the second bedroom that we have in our house. It's got a sofa bed and our TV. That's the only place we have a television. So that's where Lane and I watch TV every night after we're done working. And I put a chin-up bar in that room where the bathroom is. So whenever you go in or out of the bathroom, there's a chin-up bar. So I started doing just a set of pull-ups to failure, but not just, doing, or chin-ups actually, but not just trying to get my chin over the bar, but just really extending, getting my elbows behind me. So when I'm doing the chin-up, the bar ends up touching the top of my chest. So I'm really getting this full range of a very natural movement. And I started noticing after a couple of months, my shoulder was like 80% better than it's been in 30 years. So that whole thing of the extension part of the chin up rather than just the pulling is the thing that really made a huge difference for me. So I love in that thing that you did just what the extension does, because our shoulders are typically kind of rounded, chests are usually caved in, especially me, the former All-American gymnast, where that caved in feeling is like the most important motion there is. I spent 30 years trying to get the gymnast out of my body. So I really like that one. So that was good.
Thank you. Yes. And I can still hear, it's quite an aerobic, I can hear your breathing pattern has changed.
Yeah.
After that, because it doesn't look that intense, but you felt what that intensity is like.
Oh yeah.
And there's a significant oxygen demand after the activity
Afterwards.
itself.
Well, it's an anaerobic movement, so the oxygen kicks in later. It's the same thing when I'm sprinting. Like I do 100 meters, I take 3 breaths, but then as soon as I'm done, I can't breathe for another 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh, yes.
What's interesting for people to try this, though, is that, I mean, it really, how do I want to put this? There's an incredible neurological component, because the amount of tension that you create is, the more comfortable you get doing this, the more tension you can create. The more tension you can create, sometimes the harder it is to do, because you're really pushing the envelope of what your mind is telling you that your body can actually handle. And when you're not, when you have nothing but it's totally isometric, there's no way you're going to do something stupidly dangerous. You can't really.
Exactly. So yeah, this is almost a way of you pushing past what would be your natural limitation, your conditioned limitation. You can hit based on a certain number of kilos or pounds per square inch in terms of pressure. But here it's just about your mind.
Yeah.
And what you imagine that you're pushing. And so almost the more conditioned you get, the more focus you can get, the more difficult it becomes. So it never gets easier.
No, exactly.
So it never gets easier. And I think if you can combine this in a very short space of time and working on full range, and you're not just working on the push, but also on the pull. So you're working on the opposing muscle groups, and you're kind of opening up where most of our movements tend to be here, closed. And you're getting the afterburn effect, which is excessive post-oxygen consumption. So that's the anaerobic component, where you do some work, you don't really breathe that much, you don't need oxygen to fuel that activity. But afterwards, your body's like, give me some oxygen, please. So yeah, it's a very powerful and potent aspect of movement, even within that small. It
reminds me, the whole post-oxygen consumption thing reminds me of an argument that I have on a very regular basis with fitness guys who are promoting high-intensity interval training, and especially the ones who have the instructions, just sprint all out for 30 seconds and then rest for 30 seconds, then just do that 8 times. And I go, okay, look, if you can do that more than 2 times, you might be running as fast as you can run, but you are not sprinting. And they go, no, it's not about getting the same time. It's like going as hard as you can. I don't think you get it. If you're a real sprinter, you can do that 1.5 times and then you're done.
Totally agreed. I mean, I think even 30 seconds is probably outside of most individuals' high intensity time. Look, even if you look at people, so 200 meter sprinters, I mean, they're going all out for 200 meters. Not really, they're kind of floating around the turn sometimes, but there's no one who can sprint all out for 30 seconds. I mean, it's just not possible. So it's some of the HIIT training protocols I see when you see people saying, "Oh, I did my 45-minute HIIT class," and they're pretty much moving all throughout the class. I'm like, that's not HIIT. It's probably vigorous intensity,
right?
High vigorous intensity aerobic activity. But I was like, trust me, you would do like a Tabata protocol is a classic example. 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and you do it for 4 minutes. That's the end of the session. And usually you can't maintain what you could do for that first 20 seconds throughout all 8 rounds. And as I'm sure you're aware, the protocol was designed for Japanese Olympic elite level Olympian cyclists. They're actually speed skaters.
Oh, really? I thought it was cyclists.
Yeah, it was speed skaters.
Oh, interesting.
So they are able to push themselves at least psychologically.
It's funny with Tabata, I certainly can't do it running. There's just no way. And cycling, when I used to have a recumbent stationary bike in my house, I could get away with it there. But when I was doing that protocol, I was doing it with a water rower. And for whatever reason, that whole body motion, I could pull it off. But that last one, sometimes those last 2 sets, after it's done, I would just fall. Luckily, it was low to the ground. I would fall over, and then 10 minutes later, I'd get up, and I loved it. I mean, I really enjoyed doing it. But man, if you're really going to do it, that is a beast.
Yes, it's brutal. Yeah. So it's unfortunate that it's become almost diluted. Yeah. And whereby, people, oh yeah, I'm doing I did a 1 hour HIIT session. I'm like,
no, you
weren't. You weren't doing HIIT. Let me just tell you that now. And the few times that I have done HIIT, I've done my Tabata sessions 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like you're breathing fire. That's the one thing that I can say. You're breathing fire. I mean, you're certainly saying, please stop. Even after the first round, you're like, oh, that's not too bad. But probably second round onwards, you're like,
after the second one, you made a mistake.
Yeah. When is this gonna finish?
But this is, of course, the thing that's so entertaining is people. I'll say like you and me for the fun of it. You made a mistake, but at the same time, it's like, well, I'm not going to stop. I mean, I'm in. I mean, it's only it's 6 more. I'm in. But
yeah.
But what's also so interesting is that it is so much a mental thing, because you have that 20 seconds on, and the first 5 seconds in that 10 seconds off. It's like, all right, maybe I could I'll do this tomorrow. And then the last 5 seconds, you're just fighting with your own brain going, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And then you start getting going again. And the first 10 seconds, it's like, all right, I can make this. And the next 5 seconds, you're not so sure. And the last 5 seconds, you want to shoot yourself again.
Yeah.
Do it again.
Yeah. It really is a psychological battle.
It's incredible.
The mind versus muscle.
Yeah.
It's a very effective protocol. You can save yourself a lot of time. But I think we just have to make sure we are doing 4 minutes jogging,
right?
And then saying, oh yeah, or 45 minutes jogging, saying, hey, I did a HIIT jogging session. 20% of my potential going all out. No, not quite.
Moving back to the thing that we opened with about kids spending less time outdoors than inmates who do an hour a day typically. Talk to me about that and just sort of where you found that and how that's impacting what you're doing, and also just how you're seeing that true for adults as well. And basically, just that's an amazing statistic that look, I spend most of my day, I'm standing or walking because I've got a treadmill desk, but I spend most of my day in the office. I'm on the track on the weekends, and sometimes once or twice during the week. I'm in the gym, or not the gym, my basement where I've got my gym a couple times a week as well. But man, I don't get outside more than a few hours a week, and that's on the weekends and when I am going to and coming home from work. It's when I said that out loud, I thought about my own life. It's like, oh crap.
Yeah, that's probably me in there too. Well, I mean, I gave a TED talk recently, and I called "Why Working Out Isn't Working Out,"
Nice.
And it was just one of the stats that I pulled. I had so many interesting stats around both children's physical inactivity and the epidemic of physical inactivity, and also for adults. So children from sort of 5 to 17 should be getting an hour a day. That's the minimum recommendation by most health authorities, public health organizations. 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous intensity activity. 2 to 3 days a week should also include, muscle building, climbing, jumping, that sort of thing, vigorous intensity activity. So when you compare that to what kids are actually doing, then that's where you hit this 75% of kids not doing that, not getting outside for one, and not meeting that level of physical activity. And when you get more scientific and look at the research tells us about a third of adults, UK and US, meet the guidelines of 150 minutes per week.
Wow.
Right? Of moderate intensity physical activity. That's kind of like brisk walk, jog, going for a run, biking. That gives you an idea of what moderate intensity is. And it also includes 2 days a week of resistance training. So there are many people who may hit the aerobic component, but certainly aren't hitting the resistance component, or vice versa.
The people that I know who are hitting the aerobic component, who are like runners, a lot of runners, they, despite my repeatedly saying, do some strength work, and despite my pointing out that every researcher who is looking at running injuries, the first thing that they're doing with almost everybody is discovering that they have weak glutes, especially glute medius, and working on their glute strength. No matter how many times you tell people this, especially competitive runners, like older masters athletes, I'm surprised at how resistant they are to doing this. And especially if you say, take 2 days off from running and do some strength training, you watch the blood drain from their face. I mean, it's amazing to me.
It is amazing. And just to take that one step further, in 2 directions, actually, let's go towards the sedentary individual and the non-exercise individual. So the research a third of UK, US adults meeting the guidelines, that's based on a questionnaire. When you take those same adults and they wear an accelerometer,
right,
only 5% of adults, US adults, meet the guidelines. 5%, 1 in 20 adults. And that's not even including the resistance component. So it's probably even less than 5% most likely.
That's amazing.
So it's horrendous. So it's about 8% for children, in the US, meeting the guidelines of 60 minutes, based on accelerometer data, and 5% for adults.
There was an app that was created by some people that I know here in town. It was basically a pedometer for kids. And the idea was that for as many steps as you took or however active you were, you got points. You could trade those points in for stuff you could buy, I guess. And as soon as I heard this, I said, okay, it's going to sell really well for a couple of years because the parents are going to go, oh, my kids totally need this. And then it's going to fade because the kids won't use it, or more accurately, they'll probably sit there watching TV just shaking the thing around. And then when I saw the promo video for this device at one point, they actually had a kid who was just shaking the thing. And I was going, why did you put that in? And it's exactly what happened. Like, parents thought it was a great idea, but there was not one kid who was thinking, oh, this is awesome. I totally want to use this to win valuable prizes. And it really is outrageous. Of course, there's a funny thing about Fitbits and stuff like that, where for a lot of people, the fact that it's tracking your activity suddenly makes activity less interesting because it seems more goal-oriented than enjoyment-oriented.
Yes, and I actually cover some interesting stats again. I'm kind of plugging my TED Talk, but interestingly, 50% of people who buy wearable tech for activity, like Fitbits and the like, just keep them in their kitchen drawer or whatever. They literally buy them, pop them away somewhere, they never see them again. Out of the other 50% who use them, after 3 months, only 26% of that 50% are still using their devices.
Right.
And so it actually doesn't increase. It will increase the amount of physical activity for those who are probably already physically interested in staying active anyway. So we'll probably get more meaningful data, and it might give us a bit of gamification when we go, I haven't quite hit my target today. But for your average Joe or Jane who are looking to start that renewal relationship with exercise, I believe it's actually detrimental because it becomes almost like a burden. I missed it again. If you miss it one day, it's like, I missed it again. You start to feel bad. My sprinting training partner, she's 65. She's a world champion in the 200 meters, and she's multiple world champion or world medalist at least. And she says, for me, it's the exact opposite. I said, what do you mean? It motivates you? She goes, no, it tells me when I need to stop. You finished your workout for the day. She's, all right. Yes, you're doing too much, because I suppose that's the other side of the bell curve. So obviously we know for sedentary individuals, they suffer increased risk of all-cause mortality. So all causes of all deaths, 50% increase in all-cause mortality if you're sedentary, as opposed to just hitting the minimum guidelines. But also if you go, and then there's a bell curve, which is around sort of 300 minutes to 450 a week of physical activity, moderate intensity, and 2 to 3 times of resistance training. Once you go past that, which actually mirrors our hunter-gatherer ancestors, actually pretty much identical. Once you go past that and you go into the sphere of elite athletes, you can actually again start having these issues with chronic inflammation, with orthorexia, with upper respiratory tract infections, increased risk of injuries, probably long-term injuries and disabilities. So, we need to be hitting that sweet spot where we're promoting health.
I'm always curious in research like that about how much they break it down by activity type. And what I mean is I think about 2 things. One, the endurance athletes, especially the ultra athletes, the hidden secret there is the number of those athletes who end up with left ventricular hypertrophy. So the left ventricle of the heart gets enlarged, causes rhythmic problems. This is what Micah True, if people read Born to Run, this is what he died from. Typically, when you have left ventricular hypertrophy, it leads to something essentially a heart attack. And people don't like to talk about that one, not surprisingly. And then there's the other side. There's people on my end, the power athletes, and we just tend to die earlier anyway. for various reasons. I'm not even sure what it is. Maybe live faster, die earlier, or something. I don't know. There are not as many power athletes, so they're a little trickier to study. But you look at power lifters, you look at sprinters, yes. You look at football players. Now, again, a lot of drugs involved in some of those. Excuse me. So that's a different story. But power athletes in general tend to be on the lower side of that mortality curve as well.
Yes, they tend to fare better, apart from kind of NFL athletes where concussion obviously plays a part. And average life expectancy is really low. It's much lower than sedentary individuals, actually. But in general, the fitter we are. So if you just look at not performance, not certainly not elite levels of performance, not even club level of performance, but your average Joe or Jane who has a fairly healthy spectrum of fitness and low resting heart rate, good VO2 max, good grip strength, good kind of mobility and function. Those individuals tend to live the longest. With good quality function, with rejection in cognitive decline and the like. So I think there is a way for us to find that sweet spot in terms of the activities, and it tends to be, I would say, a much more generalist approach to movement. So not being the ultra endurance athlete, and probably not just being I'm just going to pump iron and that's all I'm going to do.
Right.
I had a discussion with someone yesterday actually about I don't need to do any cardio at all, because I do more than enough when I'm lifting weights. And I'm like, have you seen how many, and again, drugs do conflate this a little bit, but I'm like, have you seen how many Olympic lifters, power lifters, strongman competitors, bodybuilders, they're killing over and dying in their 40s, like 40s and 50s. So, I wouldn't be too confident about, I don't need aerobic cardiovascular work.
I think that is a bit myopic. I have a friend he's a long distance runner who has a great story though, where there's a whole other twist to this. He went to his doctor for a checkup, just like an annual physical or something, and his doctor said, "Wow, your resting heart rate's like 42. That's amazing." And then the next day, just coincidentally, he was going to see a Chinese doctor who did traditional Chinese medicine, and the Chinese doctor took his pulse and it was 42. Is, "Oh my God, you're about to die!" And the difference is that in the West, the idea is your heart's in good shape because you've done these things to get it so that it beats more slowly and more vigorously. And the Chinese idea is you only have a certain number of heartbeats, and so the things that you've done to train to get to 42 means you've worn it out and you're going to be dead soon. I don't know who's right, but man, I love the fact that it's like two totally different perspectives where you can really see each of them might have a point.
Yes, you could say they both have a point. The research, actually, well, I suppose most of the research is Western, but the research tends to point to, if you can drop your resting heart rate by 10 to 15 beats per minute, you will halve your risk of stroke, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. Just that one change, controlled for many other things, controlled for diet and so on, stress that you're dealing with, sleep deprivation, all this controlled, just dropping that, reducing that. Of course, there are ways you can reduce it, which are probably very extreme.
Right.
So even for myself, my resting heart rate used to be about 58 beats per minute when I wasn't doing anything at all. Now I'm in the late 30s, so I can go down to 34.
Right.
And believe me, when I've been monitored by my doctor,
they freak out.
My doctors are always like, "Oh my goodness, we need to check for arrhythmias. We need to check that everything's fine."
Yeah.
And I so I've had my heart checked regularly for the last sort of 10 to 12 years. Once that became a lot lower, and I last had it checked this year again, 24-hour ECG, or EKG, I think you guys call it. So I had a 24-hour EKG. All sorts of other tests, and fortunately at the end of it, they were just like, this is a really well-conditioned heart, no issues, everything's good, keep doing what you're doing. And I don't do any, to be fair, I don't do any endurance or ultra-endurance type of work. I do mainly, anaerobic. Most of my cardio is walking at a brisk pace. So I do quite a lot of brisk walking as well as kind of normal pace walking. And I feel that's a much safer, lower stress form of cardio that probably suits me
I was at the doctor, this was years ago. It was when I was actually training more, before I started a shoe company. And I went to the doctor, and they wanted to do an EKG on me. And it was one of these things that it's a little portable device. It's, really fast. It is like 10 seconds, and that's all they need to get it. And they said, yeah, we have to get a new machine in here because in that 10 seconds, your heart's only beating twice. And so we don't have enough info. I said, I've been having this thing where when I stand up, I get a little lightheaded, and the doctor's, yeah, your resting pulse is 40. Your blood pressure is 110/70. What do you expect? I said,
yes.
Good point.
So yeah, it's. I mean, I think whether you believe more on the Chinese side or Western medicine, I think it's just great that we can now have these additional diagnosis tools that can let us know that, hey, actually, you don't need a pacemaker, or you haven't burnt yourself out. And you don't have, you have really good blood pressure, and you have a really good resting heart rate, and you respond well to stress. Because I suppose that's the other thing. Like if if you don't have a stress response, and you're completely chilled, even when there's danger,
that's the one that's so interesting. A friend of mine, he had a company years ago. He was the first person to do this. They had a neoprene vest that they had a bunch of sensors in, so they could do real-time data sensing over 24, 48 hours with this how far back it was, a Palm Pilot. And so you have a Palm Pilot in the pocket, it's recording data. And so there was this whole theory then about heart rate variability, and that you want your heart to be able to go up and go down. Just as you breathe in, your pulse goes up. As you breathe out, it slows down. Just that alone, it was the first time they were able to measure that in real time. And the idea was that if you had no heart rate variability, then that was a bad sign. People have developed apps for training, especially for distance runners, to let you know if you've recovered enough after a run is when your heart rate variability kicks back into being normal instead of being flat, where as you breathe in and out, it stays the same. And when they developed this, they had one of the guys, I think, in their company just put it on to test it. And he had like 0 heart rate variability. And they said, you need to get to the doctor now. And they got him to the doctor, did an EKG. I think he had like a double bypass the next day. It was, really touch and go. And people, I think it's a really cool point you're making, is people don't appreciate that you are supposed to respond to stress. It is supposed to suck somewhat, and you're supposed to be able to deal with that appropriately and come back from that. That whole sine wave of how you're responding is the important part, not this imagined totally chill, nothing affects me, away we go. Yeah. I mean, that's not a survival mechanism. That it makes me wonder about some of the negatives of the mindfulness movement. Transcendental meditation is, it's very easy to be chilled out in a dark room, listening to Enya, incense burning, eyes closed, dripping water, running water, it's easy to be chilled in that scenario. Yeah.
But like, if something was to go down, you don't want to be the person who's like, oh, I'm just going to stay here and just stay chilled. No, you want to, it's like, I've got to go. We've got to take action now, So the flight response is
it's a real thing.
Is an important part of the stress response. Yeah.
Well, for some people, I had a very diehard, that's a fun way of saying this phrase, meditation practice from the time I was about 18 till I was 38. And to develop the skill of knowing how to chill out is good. I was doing biofeedback back in 74, and I could do some really crazy things. I could change my heart rate, my blood pressure pretty quickly. I could change my brain waves pretty significantly, muscle tension, temperature, all these pretty wacky things that most people think are impossible or really, really difficult to master. But with the right feedback, you can do it pretty quickly. But so getting that skill of being able to come down is nice. But frankly, for me, the thing that was the biggest, how do I want to put it, asset, if you will, for being able to do that was not caring if I felt like crap.
Yeah. I suppose. I mean, I can see the merits and the benefit of that, and of course, we do have a lot of background noise, perceived stress, and there are certainly ways that we can we should be able to maintain mindfulness and balance and being present.
And
but
you're stupid. You're stupid. You can't be smart when you're done.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing that's changed for me, the biggest thing that's changed, is I stopped beating myself up with the idea that I should be feeling or doing something different than what I'm feeling or doing. So if I'm stressed out because all hell is broken loose, that's just the way it is until it passes, and it doesn't turn into a bigger thing. Because my typical response when something major goes wrong is scream and yell and run around for a few minutes and be completely non-functional in terms of coming up with a good solution. And then as soon as I calm down, I'm all about finding the solutions. But that initial response is just running around with my hair on fire, and I got a lot of hair to be on fire. So, but that's just the way it is. No big deal.
Yeah. Acute, and that acute response, it forces us to be focused. It helps us to maintain resilience.
What's interesting on the forcing to be focused. So I mentioned to you before we started this, a couple of weeks ago, I had a kidney stone. And for people who know about these things, it was 6.4 millimeters, which is a big deal. It was the most excruciating thing I have ever felt in my life. But the thing that was so fascinating is that for brief moments, I couldn't do this continuously, but for brief moments, if I wasn't trying to find a way to not feel the excruciating pain, if I could really just dive into the sensation, if you would, it was so all-encompassing. It was so big that it was oddly euphoric for brief moments. And then it would go back to, Jesus, just terrible pain. But like there was these intermittent pieces where I would literally get lost in the sensation and had no frame of reference for whether it wasn't pleasant even. It was so all-encompassing. There was nothing else, which was fascinating. And you can't get there. A friend of mine, actually, he was one of the first Western meditation teachers. He unfortunately died a number of years ago. His idea is that meditation is actually an artificial process of trying to recreate the focus that you get when you're in pain. Because when you get that painful thing and it lets you focus like that, you can't do it any other way. And there's a healing component to that kind of attention. And so his idea is meditation is just to fake that and get the closest thing you can without wanting to kill yourself. And so he has a whole thing he developed around that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I try to bring that focal point around from a movement point of view, mindful movement in a child at play. So a child at play, regardless of how busy their environment is, whatever's happening, whatever the intensity in terms of physical intensity of activity, they are mindful. They're completely in the present. They're completely in it. So I would say, this is just from my focal point, that play is a great enabler of this mindful, nothing else matters, apart from what's happening right now. It's not even the end. Who cares about the end result? This feels good now, and that's all that matters. And there's that compression of time. 5 hours can seem like it's only a couple of minutes that have passed, or vice versa. It's like, that was only 5 minutes, but it felt like hours, but in a pleasant way. So I think most of what we do in the 21st century, unfortunately, is like a supplement or a substitute for what would have happened naturally, right? Whether it's for pain management, whether it's for physical activity interventions. And so we're trying to blend the best of the past with the best of the present and the understanding of the present. And so for me, play has been my way of getting there. That's been my pathway.
I want you to say more about what you do with that. And I want to see if you can frame it in this context. There's a conversation that I had way back when people do talk about what we did when we were hunter-gatherers. I go, but we're not walking back and forth to the river to get stones to make a house any longer. We're not having to walk 25 miles to get food and carrying an antelope back on our shoulders and then chilling out for 2 days. We're not finding a giant thing of honey where we drink gallons of it and then don't eat for 3 days. So, we can't really, and we're not running to something to make it food or away from something that thinks we're food, where we get the whole hormonal response. And I say, the difference there, it's like, look, when I train as a sprinter, I get a little sore maybe the next day, but then I do one race for 12 seconds and I'm done for 4 days. Whole different thing, training versus racing. Same thing if you're food or wanting to become food or not wanting to become food. So talk to me about what you're doing with human beings with regard to play and in the context of of what really is what we can replicate and what we really can't, because it's just not the same scenario.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all modeling for sure. It's all trying to create these almost algorithms to represent what we know anthropologically, what we can observe in present day hunter-gatherers, what movement patterns, the volumes, the durations, the intensities. But I think why I feel my approach of looking at primal movement differs is because the imagination piece, the play piece, the creativity piece, tries to recreate some of these scenarios. So of course, I can't put myself back into me being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. But when I'm sprinting, I'll give you an example of my approach to sprinting now. I will play a game called Chase the Jogger. I will see a jogger. I'll see a jogger, a couple of 100 meters away. And I'm like, I'm just going to go. I'm the lion, that's gazelle. I'll stop a few meters behind them so I don't frighten them. Like, that's what I'll do. And I'll create. And I tell you what, I can run far faster in that situation.
Yep.
When it feels far, I feel a much better hormonal response.
Yep.
There's a situation that I've created. I have to get to that target. And many times I'm like, I just can't keep up. I have to give up. And I'm like, no, I've got to get there. This is going to be I'm hunting now. Public transport is a big thing in London, of course, pedestrianised city. And so sometimes I'll chase the bus.
Right.
I'll purposely miss the bus, and I'll try and sprint to the next bus stop.
Love it.
And people on the bus are like, they're either laughing at me or concerned for my welfare, and I'm huffing and puffing. But I tell you what, having a real scenario that really matters I think gets us even closer to what we're trying to recreate, rather than it being, right, at 2 p.m., I'm going to do a 200-meter sprint session in a fartlek training. So for me, I've tried to create a structured, unstructured approach to how I play and how I move and how I interact with the environment.
When I lived in Manhattan and rode my bicycle, I had the opposite of that, where I was the gazelle and the cars were, the ones chasing me. And for a long time, it was really fun. But then when I committed to moving away from Manhattan, I realized that part of what I was good at was just suppressing sheer terror. But although
that is pretty terrifying.
But when you're being chased, that's actually what's going on. And I got to tell you, that was when I was in the best shape of my life.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. But yeah, you can create. If I'm doing a group session, we'll create that scenario. And again, it's like being a kid.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, chasing games.
Yep.
No one teaches kids to play chasing games. It's part of their DNA. It's like dogs playing chase. Kids will do it. It's a universal game. And I think this is part of what stays with us. That's what stayed in our DNA. And so, we can't replicate all of that environment from the past, but so much of it is still within us that as kids, we recreate it. Kids will still continue to crawl, even though they can start walking properly, right? They will crawl over things, even though it may not be socially acceptable to climb, right? But they will, it's like, no, we want to do this. We want to jump. We want to climb. We want to carry, let's piggyback carry. They have no context for that. It's just like, they don't see adults doing that, right?
Right. Carrying
each other necessarily, but it's just like, no, let's just do this. So I've just tried to recreate that nostalgic aspect of my childhood, recognizing that most of it is not just about childhood, but it's part of is human behavior that as adults we suppress very well.
Right.
And for most of the animal kingdom, they continue that. Big cats will still continue to play. They don't just go, we're big cats now, we don't play anymore. They'll pretty much play, not the same sort of frequency,
right?
But they will continue to play, and they'll still have very dynamic and vigorous and powerful movements, graceful movements, even into old age. And so I feel, for me, if I try to maintain that youthful, exuberant aspect of movement that is childlike, not childish, because I understand the importance now as a man. I'm like, no, this is really important. And, I'm not doing this to just roll around and go, hey, isn't this fun? Woo! It might be fun, but I want to improve my health. and my longevity and my mental focus and cognition. So I've got to be serious about this. And so when you look at kids, or when I look at kids now, I'm like, kids, most of their time when they play, they're very serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at risk. They're evaluating risk. They're looking at conflict resolution. They're creating rules. They're changing things up on the fly because, this is boring. Let's mix things up. Isn't it better when the adults aren't around because we can do some stuff that the adults wouldn't let us do? That's part of their play experience. And a lot of it isn't laughing and joking.
Right.
A lot of it is very serious, really focused. Let's concentrate. How are we going to do this? How are we going to work together? If you don't want to play a part, you're going to be left out. We're social creatures. Do you want to be part of this community, or do you want to be the bully?
It's so funny. I watched something on YouTube last night. It was a World Parkour Championships, and there was a whole lot of play involved in it, of course. But what was incredibly lacking is something you just mentioned that I hadn't thought of is no one was ever doing anything together. It's all just an individual thing, and it's competition and it's fun, but no one's doing anything together. And that would be a whole amazing twist to that activity.
Yes, because the purest form of play is when it involves other people.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, of course you can play by yourself, but it's much better when you're creating, you're involved in creating the play space, the play environment, the rule set. You equalize because, you're new to the game, so let's make it a bit easier for you. Let's change the rules on the fly. We haven't got the right equipment. Who cares? Let's do, So I do think for adults, even though we've got all of these, like OCR racing, for example, where they go, okay, we do have a teamwork element. Mm-hmm. That is part of that, right? Or CrossFit, where, we've got a group, we've got great camaraderie, but most of it is still about the individual. Yeah. The individual gets the medal.
Yep.
I'll help you, but if I'm gonna lose by helping you, maybe maybe not. So we've got a lot to learn from, I would say, from childhood play and the true play ethos.
So what's another example of something you'll do in a Primal Play workshop with people to get them into this?
So I play a version of Tag called Primal Play Tag, which is like a modified kids game where you play partners or as a group, and you'll just pick certain parts of the body you can tag, and you'll play simultaneously. And for some, it might start off quite combative, but then when you realize you almost like want to have a rally, and so most people are laughing immediately, and they're getting out of breath, and they're, it's really challenging on their balance and coordination. But if you can get laughter instantly and you're enjoying the process, but you're still ticking all the boxes, the fitness boxes, the components of fitness boxes, that's what I'm trying to recreate. So animal movements are a big part of that, different types of crawls and jumps. And again, creating this environment where you go, it just doesn't matter what I look like, what are people wondering what I'm doing. And, you finish your session, you finish your game, and you don't just feel great because of the endorphin rush, the being swamped with, endocannabinoids, because it's like your body's like, I'm in pain. Oh, don't worry about it. Here's some endorphins to suppress the pain. You feel great because you felt great for the entire time.
Right.
You've been laughing, you've been joking, you've been releasing oxytocin, you've been maintaining eye contact. You've recognized that collaboration and cooperation matters, and the competitive element drops significantly. So that's something we've lost, I would say, as adults. We've lost the ability to truly just play the game.
Right.
And wouldn't it be great to see? I don't know if you watch Wimbledon, for example, or the tennis, and sometimes players have been knocked out, and they'll be doing training sessions with some of the guys who are still going through, and they'll just, they'll start doing trick shots. Right. That they'll like, the ball will bounce twice. Who cares? They're not trying to ace each other on smashing each other on the serve, and they'll have these incredible rallies, and they're laughing and joking. And so I suppose that's what I'm trying to create. Yeah. You're almost creating this rally mentality where it's like, or you're playing soccer. You're like, just keep the ball up, whatever it takes. Everyone just, the ball cannot kind of like touch the ground.
Well,
and
what you're describing is interesting because it's not that the competition has been removed, but it's sort of serving a different purpose.
Yes, it's not the,
or it's a different it's a different type of competition. You're not trying to win / beat someone, even if you're, when you're playing tag, there's definitely, but it has a different flavor. If you're working with people to keep the ball up, I mean, there's definitely a goal. You're trying to do it, but you're also doing it and rooting for everyone. You're trying to be helpful for everyone at the same time.
Yes. So you're trying to keep, it's like dogs play fighting. You could have a boxer dog, Great Dane, and a Chihuahua, and they can play fight.
Right.
And the boxer knows, if I just smack the Chihuahua the first time we start play fighting, that's the end of the game.
Yeah.
Right? I've knocked the Chihuahua out. That's it. If the boxer reins it in, or the Great Dane reins it in, the Chihuahua can still go 100%, and they keep that game going. That's what it is. It's still competitive. It's still, it's still part of that, but it's not the main aim.
Right.
And so, pretty much it's the activity, not so much. It's the attitude that you bring towards the game, that you bring towards the movement pattern, which is important. I've just modified games to make them, and activities to make them more playful, but to still give you the result you want from fitness.
I'm comparing this to the things that are popular, where on the one hand is the competitive part, it is completely out. I'm thinking of something like Zumba, which I refer to as New Age aerobics, and I mean, and I'm not trying to denigrate it really, because it can be terribly fun. Just not my thing, but I know people who totally love it. But again, there's not a real challenge there. There's certainly no competitive aspect, versus the exact opposite, like, boot camp classes, where on the one hand, hey, congratulations, you're out on the grass in a park. On the other hand, you're just at the gym with someone yelling at you. And so what you're describing is something that is, I don't want to call it an amalgam, certainly, but it's a different point that encapsulates and encompasses a number of things from each in a way that I love much more. Anyway, that's a big setup for what do you think it's going to take for more and more people to have that primal play experience, or to make that something where people see that as a uniquely valuable alternative with a whole different set of what's the word I'm looking for? Attributes. That's not it. A whole different set of bunch of things that you can't get any other way. And whatever that word is that I can't find. What's it going to take to move this idea so compelling forward?
It's really just a case of people experiencing it. So I've traveled a lot. I've been exposed to lots of different audiences, from the most serious, elite athletes, to those who've been very sedentary, couch potatoes, those who have mobility issues, and very young to much older adults. And for most people, once they experience this, it's because it's part of us.
Right. Fun
movement, enjoyable movement is part of us. It just kind of, people just, have this kind of eureka moment where they go, hold on a second, I've got, it's like a bit like muscle memory, right? We've all got this muscle memory if we were formerly fit or athletic or did track at school or whatever, and it doesn't take much for us to get that back. We've all got this play memory. We've all got this fun and joy for movement that pretty much was condensed in most of our childhoods. And we try to recreate it in adulthood, and we fail miserably.
Yeah.
The closest we probably get to it actually is maybe at a wedding, and everyone's had a drink, and people, haven't get on the dance floor, and they couldn't care less what they look like, and and that's probably. And it's like that, you see the 8-year-old granny who moving like she's 16. You haven't seen her she hasn't got out of a chair for years, and she's all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, my favorite song's on, and she walks on with a walking stick, but she throws it away and starts dancing for a bit, and so it's almost like getting adults to appreciate that inner child is always there.
No, You are so right though about the wedding thing. I'm just having flashbacks. My mom was famous for, what's the Russian dance thing where you're squatting and then you kick out one leg, whatever that's called.
Like Cossack dancing, I think it is. Isn't it Cossack or something? Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom could do that, and like up into her 60s, and every time I was at a wedding, there she was. And she was never active, never did anything else, but at a wedding, and she didn't even need a couple drinks. She just needed, the barest amount of encouragement. Just like, hey,
so yeah,
so
just people having fun in a community sense.
Yeah.
So I'm spreading the word in relation to this. I'm getting people to experience this. I'm writing books. I have courses. I'm training trainers. I have a certification program. So it isn't just relying on me now.
Yeah.
There are other disciples who believe that this is an important kind of intervention and is different enough to say, not disparaging anything else, but it's like, if you do want to have a love affair with movement, which is more love than hate, and that you can do anywhere, and you recognize that you are the best equipment you have, and wherever you're at is the best gym you're in. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And if you want joy from movement, this is what we're offering. And if you want not only joy but also gains,
right,
which are not just physical, of course, but if you want physical gains and you want the mental benefits and stress reduction and social interaction with other humans, and you want to go, I just spent 3 hours moving, but it felt like 5 minutes. Tick, tick, tick.
And to be clear, it's not like we're suggesting that this is the only thing that people should be doing. It's part, like you were saying, we were talking about beginning, it's part of being, the whole, well, yeah, but I mean, but it's part of the sort of, let's call it the whole fitness package. I mean, for me, one of the things that I like about sprinting, it's funny, my mind is not very linear. If you look in my office, there's just a bunch of piles of things. Organization is not my strongest suit. But when it comes to physical things, I'm the exact opposite. I love things that are precise. Sprinting is very precise. I love target shooting, like archery, or when I was a kid, I did target shooting, rifle shooting. Things where it really, like at the end of a race, when someone says, how'd you do? My answer is, do you want it with the excuses or do you just want the time? Because you never get it perfect. And but I love that. There's something about the intermittent reinforcement of never being able to get it perfect and you're always trying. At the same time, to turn that off and just roll around and have fun. I'm not trying to say that's what Primal Play is, but the flip side of doing things that are just fun, that's just another flavor. It's a different scoop of ice cream, and having all of that
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like having a smorgasbord buffet, or do you want to go to a 5-star, Michelin restaurant? At the end of the day, they're both serving food. They can both serve very nutritious food. It's just a different way of getting there. Right? Yeah.
So if people want to have this experience, and I encourage them to do so, tell humans where they can track you down or track Primal Play down.
Yeah, the best place is probably my blog, which is primalplay.com. I'm known as the Fitness Explorer, so you can search on social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, on YouTube for the Fitness Explorer. I have a book called Animal Moves, which was an Amazon bestseller.
It's a great book.
The UK and the US. Thank you, Stephen. And also probably the best primer, 16 or 17 minutes or so, is my TED Talk, Why Working Out Isn't Working Out. And I think that probably covers...
That's a good start.
Yeah, I think that's a good introduction to how you can get in touch with me.
I was going to ask anything we left out, but as the words started coming out of my mouth, I realized there's nothing. We didn't have an agenda, and certainly we covered a bunch of topics that we never expected because I don't plan any of this. But is there anything else that you want to add before we call it a day and thank people for joining us?
Yeah, I suppose if you want to find out more about the importance of play, I do have a free ebook available at my website at primalplay.com. And I also have a significant evidence base. So if you're interested in some of the science, not only about play, but also about physical activity and the health benefits, physical and cognitively, then come onto my website and there's more enough to keep you interested for a while.
And it's one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that this isn't just some idea that you cooked up and away you go, just trying to convince people without anything underpinning it. Not that people need the evolutionary underpinning, but to see that it's there. Some people actually do. They really need to justify it in some way, but also just see it. It's a nice thing in the same way that we're talking about like different physical activities being valuable, to have both the physical and the cognitive piece playing together. It's just helpful so that you don't feel like you're just goofing around. That there's really a there. It connects you to history in an unusual way. It connects you to, I mean, I don't want to sound overly new agey in this wacky way, but I mean, it really does connect you to humanity in a way that you may get on your own just from doing the play. I was going to say the work, but it's doing the play because you feel it. But to actually understand that as well, it just gives it an extra depth. Like the physicist Richard Feynman, someone said to him, I would hate to be you because you just see everything as like mathematics. He goes, oh, no, you don't understand. For me, it's so much richer. When you see a glass of water, I'm just amazed to see through molecules and around atoms and how the light is refracted. Sometimes I can't even pick up the glass because I'm so awestruck by a glass of water. And, same thing.
Wow. Yes. And just I suppose in closing, it's attributed to Einstein, but Einstein did say play is the highest form of research. So I think for somebody like Einstein to have said this is also pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little out of context, but I get your point.
It is, yeah. It is just a bit, but it is attributed to him, and I suppose it's just describing.
I think what he meant by that is that so much of what scientific research is an intellectual form of play, because you're really just toying with these ideas until something starts to sift out of not being linear, not being rigid, of really just enjoying where it's going to go and how it's going to go. And there are, some rules that you're playing with. So I would say that what he's talking about is, let's call it the intellectual version of exactly what you've been talking about.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I totally agree. Yes, yeah. It enables you to be a better scientist because you're constantly thinking about, what's outside of my present consciousness.
Yeah, what are the known unknowns? What do I know that I don't know? And how can I start playing in that realm and see what I discover? It's my favorite thing when physicists, when they're about to discover some new thing or examine some new thing that they haven't been able to look at before, half of them are going, oh God, I hope I'm wrong. Because if they're wrong, it means everything is upset. Everything is is open for reinterpretation, which is incredibly exciting and very playful. And boy, to have it, especially at that level, where with our current understanding of the way the world works, to get something totally new would be just, oh man, what a blast that would be.
Christmas morning again with your whatever your toy. The toy that you wished for as a kid, I suppose, and your birthday morning. It's just another year. Oh my goodness, what am I going to get this year? What has come out this year? What technology has led to this device that I have in front of me? But yeah, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you, Stephen, for
as
sure.
Always, Darryl. So, well, A, thank you again. B, I hope people do take you up on it and go to primalplay.com. In signing off, thank you all for being here, of course, and being part of the movement, where, as I like to say, we are creating a movement of getting people to understand that natural movement is the obvious, better, healthy choice, the way natural food is. And I want to thank Darryl for being one of the people who's contributing to this new zeitgeist, if you will. And that is a phrase that is way too ridiculous to have said, but there came out of my face anyway. So if you want to be part of the movement, and I would love it if you are, go to jointhemovementmovement.com. You can find out all the ways that you can interact with us. If you have any questions or comments or want to make a recommendation for anything on the show, you can also just email move@jointhemovementmovement.com. And of course, do all those things to review and share and like and click on the subscribe button and hit the bell on YouTube. As I like to say, if you want to be part of the tribe, please subscribe. Thank you so much. And until next time, live life feet first.